It's an interesting time for marketing and media professionals because the Internet Advertising Bureau, or IAB, has expanded their definition of digital channels. This is in response to traditional media like out-of-home and TV investing heavily in infrastructure and technology upgrades in recent years. The upgrades have armed these channels with digital capabilities like targeting and measurement so that digital now cuts across both brand and activation channels. However, despite digital out-of-home and broadcast video on demand being classified as digital, it's still open to debate. Recently, I interviewed CEO of the IAB, James Chandler, and PwC's digital expert, Steph Claxton, about what the classification means for the advertising industry and how readily it's been accepted. We also brought a client's perspective into the conversation, where we're joined by the head of Programmatic at Hyperoptic Broadband, Jawad Safdar. Jawad was able to bring a unique perspective because he has been using brand and digital channels interchangeably in his demand generation team. For the next 30 minutes, we debate the challenges that the industry faces when adopting traditional channels as digital and how they could be overcome. Here's what they had to say.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. So, Steph, James, great to have you here. And thanks for taking the time.
Pleasure.
No. I mean, there's going to be quite a few of topics to go through. So let's kick off immediately by talking about, obviously we had broadcast video on demand and out of home, digital out of home that have come through and so forth. I'm interested, first of all, just from a classification standpoint, at the moment when it comes to AVOD, BVOD and digital out of home, how actually they're seen by the IAB in terms of things, in terms of how they're classified, and also as well from a agency standpoint. And then I'm quite very interested to get Jay's perspective on things, in how your view on that, how they may be seen, might be slightly different from the classification standpoint on things. So I don't know who wants to, Steph?
Probably James. I'll go James first, then me.
I mean, it's a great first question, and I'm not sure there's one answer. There's lots of ways you can look at it. And I remember when we first started talking about things like AVOD and BVOD and connected TV, the idea that you just change the thing that went into the back of the television. So instead of an aerial, which was linear, we suddenly plugged it into the internet. But did that mean it was digital? We weren't showing any ads on them at that point. They were just smart TVs, and there'll be plenty of smart TVs that aren't plugged in as well. So how do you define what's digital and what's not? Similarly, in out of home, is the escalator panel that I'm seeing, and it's not paper and paste, is that digital, or does it need to be something very, very sophisticated that's traded in an automated way? So I think there is no hard and fast definition in out of home, in connected TV. Should podcast be digital but radio be radio? So I think I think really, and I'd love to get Jay's take on it, is I think it's up to us to kind of come together collectively as industry and go, okay, what's this glossary? What do the definitions mean? Because there must be a benefit in all talking about the same things in the same way and having it less complicated.
Yeah, and I think I don't know, Steph, Jay, who wants to start off?
I really agree with James. I think we obviously work really closely with the IAB, and when we try and define things, the truth is everyone has a different perspective. Everyone has it sitting in a different area of their business. Everyone approaches it in a different way. At PwC, we actually do a media and entertainment outlook report where we look at 14 different advertising segments, and we have connected TV in the TV advertising segment and the internet advertising segment. So we basically say it sits in both, but we call it internet advertising. We don't call it digital. And therefore, and connected not connected TVs, and therefore digital out of home, it doesn't sit there. In fact, it sits completely separately. And I think that's the challenge we face. It's not like paid search where there's one definition, everybody uses it, and there's no kind of argument or debate about it. I feel like it's really open to debate still.
I think it depends so much on how a marketing team is set up as well. So I think you see a lot of brand teams and either an acquisition team or a product marketing team. And the acquisition and product teams have become more and more synonymous with digital. So it's like that team does the digital channels because they're performance channels, and the brand team does TV. And they're kind of almost seen as a bit like arch nemesis, because when you get something that's a bit in the middle, like a digital audio, they're like, but it's digital,
Yeah.
but it's an audio feels like it's radio, because the craft that is required to make an asset is potentially a bit more creative. So people think it's a brand channel, but it's not. It's not necessarily, because you could still be using one of those channels to drive a performance KPI. So it's not clear cut when it comes to those.
And it's quite interesting, because I come from a banking perspective. This has got all the sort of attributes of a turf war, in terms of like between the various players that are in there, of like, that's mine, thank you very much, and this is keep your hands off it and so forth. I mean, when you look at it without sort of maybe getting too controversial, when you look at it in terms of let's say from the various players in the market, in terms of how agencies look at things, within advertisers as well, in terms of marketing teams as well, and I guess also as well within sort of the IAB and how sort of seen from the outside, because Steph, you said about the forecasts. Do you think there is a potential sort of risk at the moment that essentially, because of the sort of whole thing about where boundaries start and finish, that in a way that becomes the primary focus rather than necessarily what the client needs and what's best for the client? And actually, Jay, should we start off with?
It's an interesting one, because I definitely see that. And how do you get that independent voice sometimes that isn't from the brand agency or the digital agency? Because both those agencies will want more business. So if it is a media plan or a brief that's gone over that is to deliver, say, mortgage share sales for a bank, that digital agency might include digital out of home on the plan, and then it gets a no from the client, because they're too scared to say yes, because they know that will be a bit controversial when they go back internally. It's just easier to run with what you've done before, rather than ruffle someone's feathers.
Yeah, the structural thing is so interesting though. If you think how media agencies were originally set up, there were a finite number of media channels, therefore you needed specialists in all of them, you needed some planners, you needed some strategists, you needed some people to buy them. So telly and print, radio, outdoor, all of those I guess what we call traditional channels now all had individual specialisms. They were bought in different ways. You needed specialists to understand them. And then, of course, digital comes along and doesn't just create another silo, it cuts across all of them. So suddenly we start talking about digital out of home and connected TV. So structurally, if you're an agency, what do you do with those people who have made a career buying 6 sheets paper and paste or buying inserts in print? So I think there's a journey there. You've got to retrain those people, get them excited about a digital future. You've also got a bunch of really highly talented digital people as well who understand all these new ways of buying and the fact you can measure all this new stuff. So I think it's very, very interesting from a structural point of view. Perhaps that's happening in client side as well. Lots of kind of talk of in-housing, which shortcuts a lot of that stuff. But I think, and the caveat is, I'm from a big agency background, as is Steph, and I think, we probably saw this very interesting transition from what do you do with digital audio, for example? What do you do with podcast advertising? Do you get your radio team to buy it, or do you get your digital guys to buy it? And I remember when video was like, who buys video? Is it a digital team? Is it your biddable team who do all the Facebook? Is it the AV team? And I mean, it must have just been so confusing if you're a supplier going into an agency going, I just need someone to buy this thing, but who do I go and ask?
I guess it was to, as it were, chuck the proverbial grenade into things and so forth. I mean, is there a case, because at the moment what we have with these things is very much silos, the out-of-home silo, the TV silo, the digital silo. Is there a case, certainly for video, for actually just saying, instead of having a TV out of home and a digital video, have a video team that encompasses everything that, as it were, people would think about in terms of site?
It makes absolute sense that you would do that. And I remember talking 5 years ago, looking at other people's slides where they're saying, the future of media is basically someone sat at a computer terminal and they're going to buy all of their media programmatically, whether it's out of home, whether it's audio, whatever it might be, your virtual reality campaign, your retail, you'll just have someone at a terminal, someone will plan it and they'll just be buying it from one thing. And the idea of that was actually quite scary because it's a whole kind of, it's a whole craft that you're taking out of that negotiation, all that kind of thing. But that sort of makes perfect sense. A video is a video and, it's got a narrative arc and it's there to do a job and it could be cut in 10 seconds, 20 seconds or 90 for something that will work in cinema, on an escalator panel, on an iPad. I mean, I don't want to make it reductive, but it feels like that would be a more sensible way of doing it. I don't know, you tell me, Joe,
Yeah.
rather than getting 10 lines of video back all by different teams on a plan.
Even interestingly, like within my team, the structure I came into, we all had lots of channel specialists. So an
Right.
affiliates one, a search one, a social one, and direct mail. And I've come in and recognised there's need to be more fluid. Like we're always talking about
Fluid's a good
agility.
word.
Yeah.
But so now we're rebranding as the demand generation team. And then we looked at the objective. Are we going to be planning a brand campaign, long-term objectives, or is it short-term activations and about... And then you pick the mix that's right by objective. Whereas if you're so entrenched in like, I'm just going to churn out my social campaigns every week, you don't necessarily think a bit bigger.
Yeah.
And about the customer perspective as well. So yeah.
There's such an interesting thing with digital native brands, so, D2C brands or small SMEs who don't have any distinction between brand and demand and performance. They've got to sell more things, more sunglasses, and if Instagram's the best way to do that, then they just turn up the Instagram. If they try the out of home, then they'll kind of do that. It's
that short-termism is like, you see that everywhere. And
totally.
it's easy to measure those things as well. Whereas when you get to digital out of home and VOD, people don't click through. So the digital specialists, whilst they can buy it, they're used to seeing CPMs. If they're not seeing the click-through traffic, they're like, it looks like it's not performing. But the measurement techniques required are just totally different.
Isn't measurement what's key here?
100%.
Isn't measurement what's always held us back? Because I feel the same. Like, yes, now the big BVOD players take third-party tracking from an ad server perspective, but they're not taking like the ad verification tracking. So if a client cares about fraud, brand safety, viewability, you can't compare like for like.
Yeah.
The kind of YouTube Meta main sell or main area where they're trying to pull money away from is broadcast VOD. Broadcast VOD, I think, on a personal perspective, I think understandably is saying like, we're not the same, we're not offering you the same thing. Or yes, it might be video, but it's very different quality. So just because that's cheaper or offering you a cost per view model, don't force us into that world. But that's the problem we have. They're not, video is just... unfortunately not quite the same in all areas still. So it's a bit like someone needs to come in and say, everyone do the same thing. Everyone.
It's like people talk about attention. So not all impressions are the same. And even within video, you get such a different range of quality, but we're not ready to buy based on attention yet.
And I think the context thing is so important. You're bang on, Steph. And I think if you've got someone, watching a video on a 3G connection on the back of a bus versus someone in, a darkened cinema, beautifully captive, not doing anything else. I mean, the context is completely different. You could be watching exactly the same thing, but take different things from it. So I think it's bang on. And on the measurement point, we do a dip every year with a whole panel of advertisers. The question we ask them is, what's stopping you spending more in digital advertising? Measurement every time, 5 years consistently. And when they say it, that it's a bit nuanced, but what they effectively mean is, I want to be able to measure all of my digital stuff in the same way, search with social, with platforms. But better than that, the gold at the end of the rainbow is I want to measure my out of home and my telly and my all with the same metrics. Things like, how many cans of deodorant is that stuff selling me? That's and I don't have the silver bullet. Unfortunately, we get asked every year. I just can't summon up that silver bullet. It would be easier, right? I mean, very simple.
Well, it's quite funny when you look at the whole. I mean, it's going to be actually another separate podcast on the whole measurement thing. But it's quite interesting if you look at what's happening sort of quite recently. In terms of measurement, it's really started to get a lot of attention from private equity and investment banks.
It's what will drive the growth. If people can measure, they can know where to invest. 100%.
Know where to invest, and they're talking, what happens with Netflix when Netflix comes on, and that's an entirely, Disney Plus. How do you measure that, and where does that fit in with the ad budgets as well? So, I mean, it's funny with that whole video thing because and I guess it sort of goes on to the programmatic. So, touched on the programmatic thing, is one of the issues that I think certainly I think the TV industry has had maybe less so the out of home industry, is there's always a fear of essentially, does this mean, you can see the sort of discussions about Project Origin in the UK. Is it that essentially we're going to open up the door to actually the online giants just taking all our ad money? What I find interesting, it'd be very interesting sort of your sort of points of view in this. What I find interesting about that conversation is it seems to be a one-way street. It seems to be driven by a fear of essentially Facebook's and Google's taking TV money, but there never seems to be the idea of could AVOD actually take money from Facebook and Google and start to take those digital digital dollars as well.
Yeah, I think you have to educate the marketer that whilst your CPM might be 30 times higher, you have to measure it differently as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, how do you get an agnostic measurement partner that can give you the relationships between media? Because TV or digital TV or YouTube and digital out of home, they're going to generate demand into your online channels, which will convert. And like one of the questions I always get is, how do we get more PPC brand? Like, how can't we scale it? We can't just spend more on PPC brand. You have to do other things to get people to search.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, it all seems to come back to this real point about measurement. Really is, really is the key thing in giving, as it were, brands the confidence that essentially, that they know what they're getting. Again, let me ask something that may seem sort of slightly controversial, slightly left field and so forth. Do you think there is a risk that essentially it's a bit, there's a risk of essentially marketers, advertisers, everyone involved in the industry, perhaps with some of these issues going too far down the rabbit hole in trying to, I always think of, when I hear some of the debates and the conferences, and I mean, to me, it brings me back to when I did my history degree, and sort of about the Reformation and sort of question marks about how many angels dance on a pinhead. In terms of some of these questions that are sort of brought up, it seems a real sort of like, okay, you really are going down into the nth degree of this, and maybe missing, as it were, the bigger picture. Do you think there is a sort of happy medium? Because again, from a banking perspective, I was an analyst for 20 years. And when I would do forecasts, you could have the same company starting off from the same point, but we would have 20 different sets of forecasts because it would all come down to the assumptions that people had put in. But everyone would realize you never have a perfect answer.
Yeah.
That things would always change, that essentially, you could never get to that perfect point. And that was fine. It was just if you were going in the right direction and you got the general trend right, that was the most important thing.
Yeah. I feel like complexity is, I feel like we've made things unnecessarily complex. And I'm using we, the sort of the royal we here. I think as an industry, we've not done a great job of keeping things, keeping everyone on the same page. And I mean advertisers and I mean agencies. I think particularly when you get into the really sticky weeds of digital and ad tech and programmatic, it can get really, really complex. And there's some incredibly smart people. I think probably what we've not done a great job of is then sort of coming back up to the surface for air and making that a very tangible thing for advertisers to get and understand. It's like trying to get someone to buy telly who has never owned or watched a television. That would be quite hard, right? So how do we expect someone to understand the inner workings of ad safety and fraud and things like that, and what some of these tools are doing? And I think that's what's led to things like sort of suspicion around digital. That idea of where's the kind of money going? I think because we've made it too complicated, we've not been transparent enough. And I do wonder if we spent more time trying to make things easier to understand for agencies and for advertisers and the people buying this stuff, that lives would be far more enjoyable and easier, and we would sort of relish and maybe celebrate the work a bit more, rather than, I think, getting bogged down in, I don't really understand this, so I'm not sure I want to do it, and the measurement feels quite difficult. Why don't we spend more time making that stuff easier?
I think I'd jump at any agency or supplier that can make it easy for me to sell something internally. So this is why you should do it, this is how we'll test it, and this is what we'll do next. So, frame it in something that's digestible rather than something that's going to be that to get approval on.
Because you must be, sometimes you must be like, well, I just need a simple answer. A simple narrative that says this is
what's happening in the industry, this is what other brands are doing, case studies, this is what it could look like from performance. Because sometimes you just don't know until you actually do it. Like, how do you forecast TV if you've not done TV? How do you forecast out of home if you've never done out of home? And it's those scale-up organizations as well, that if they've never done it before, it's hard to make that jump. Whereas like the more established brands, everyone already kind of knows it. And if you're moving a bit of spend from out of home to digital out of home, it's less scary. But when you're going into out of home for the first time, it's like, that's how do we get comfortable? Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to move budget from somewhere. Realistically, it's really hard to like conjure up money.
Yeah.
You're gonna
Keep doing that for
yeah, so you're gonna have to move it from something you have medium to high confidence in to something that you.
So it's immediately risk, isn't it? If you take it out of something that's probably working, or at least not failing, and put it into something else, there's an element of risk.
Yeah, that's
And do you think sometimes as well, C-suite are just like, why take a risk if my brand search delivers? So you default to what you know.
Can't we just get more of what we're already running? And that doesn't work because you can't scale social just by spending twice as much money. Whereas I think C-suite people think that is possible.
I think that's true. Yeah. And because at PwC as well, we've seen quite a few examples where we've had like addressable TV companies. We've worked with JCDecaux. We've had out-of-home companies come to us and say, we're trying to scale our digital offering or our programmatic offering. We're facing a challenge in that clients want third-party ad serving because that's what they're used to in digital.
Yeah.
So how can we demonstrate to them that our product works? How can we demonstrate to them that that we're doing what we say we're doing because they can't check it themselves? That price points are what they say they are for the reasons why. How can we demonstrate delivery? So these companies are trying to invest to build that story for brands and C-suites, because I think they are facing a bit of a battle in that if the minute you put like the word programmatic, and James and I were joking about the PDOOH acronym, and but it's the
really needed another acronym. Really needed one. Crying out.
But the minute you put in like digital out of home, programmatic digital out of home, addressable TV, or like BVOD that we're trading programmatically, I think people go, okay, fine, so it will look like digital. Everything about it will look
that's
like
a really
what I'm
interesting
used
point.
to. And it's like, oh no, well, it doesn't quite look like that. And then it's like, oh, well, why? Then what is it? And then it leads to lots of questions and it leads to challenges. And we've kind of made it hard for ourselves in giving it the same name, but in not giving it the same name. Where does it sit? What is it like?
That's actually brilliant. I mean, that's absolutely superb. It's bang on the money.
I think there's an interesting bias as well depends what the senior management, where they've come from, where their heart is at. So I had one role where the director or most senior person in marketing was from PPC. So he was like a digital through and through person. And if he wanted to do digital out of home or digital audio, it was like totally cool. He was still fine. But in other organizations, someone's come from a print and TV background and you're trying to move spend into digital. It's like, what? Why are you doing that? Just do more linear. So what senior people are comfortable with, your organisation and marketing department end up swaying towards that.
100%. And that just comes back to the complexity for me. There is a distance between my understanding of digital and then my level of risk that I want to take. And don't forget, if I don't understand something, like I don't really understand how TikTok works, disclaimer, but it'd be very difficult for me in a forum around a board table to go, I don't really understand this. Like senior people don't really do the sort of fallibility thing. I know it's not really a thing. So we don't ask. So they don't ask. So they don't know. So they don't do it. So I think we could all, and this is our job totally as a trade body, to really, I think, help people understand what these particularly sort of emerged and emerging areas are, whether that's connected TV or programmatic digital out of home, gaming, AR, all of these things. If we get the complexity stuff very simple at the start, I think we're starting from a much better place.
And I think it's a great point about the boards and the management teams. I mean, boards don't have that much time on their hands, quite simply. The whole idea sort of them saying, okay, well, I'm going to go into the weeds of what they're not going to do it. But what they will want is somebody they feel as though they can trust. And it all comes down to, if they feel as though they've got somebody who they sort of can turn around and say, this person knows what it's about and they get where I come from, they will trust that person.
100%.
And that I think is the educational standpoint that almost is key there. I'm going to end on I'm going to ask two questions, okay? So
I was going to say, is it what did we have for breakfast?
No, it's not what we had for breakfast. Otherwise, I'd have to answer that. You already know the answer, and I don't want to repeat it. So I don't want to spread that out.
Pints of milk.
I know, absolutely shocking. I guess the what? So the first question is, and it's not about breakfast, and it's not about what you're going to have for lunch either.
Yeah, no.
It's essentially, if there was one thing that you could change in the entire process that you think would make the biggest difference, what would it be? And I'm going to start off with Jay.
I would actually drop the word digital. And I thought this would have happened by now. I think it just makes things more siloed than they need to be. And there was talks about this ages ago, like people dropping digital from digital marketing. There's so many job specs that say digital marketing manager. Look for people who can deliver to an objective. And pivot, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's nice.
Steph, what would you change?
I would change the ambiguity around definitions. So I think we should say this is what it is, and everybody agrees, and there's no debate, kind of no nuances. That's it.
Okay. And James?
I think I would create some sort of, stick with me here, it could be an on-tour physical thing or a digital thing, some sort of amnesty for senior people to come and say, I don't understand this thing. And they can anonymously put it in there, and as an industry, we come together and we answer it for them really clearly, and we tell everyone what it is. So no one has to feel silly, no one feels stupid or that they don't know, but we raise the bar in terms of people's knowledge. So there isn't this distance between these emerging areas and people feeling like, oh God, I'm mega senior, I earn loads of money, I'm going to in 3 years, I can't ask about that thing. So some sort of amnesty maybe goes on tour.
Like a confessional box.
In a little curtain. Yeah, I'm on one side, people coming in, see them. Brilliant. Right, let's do it.
I tell you what, as a Catholic, you bring back memories for me. So, and the second question, and actually after Jay just saying that, you should drop the word digital, I'm now going to put that in the second, now that is a core part of the second question. When it comes to digital, when you see how the industry is doing, how would you mark the industry, where it stands at the moment, out of 10? And Jay, I'll let you go last on this one, because, bit unfair. But James?
I would be glass half full. I'd give us a 7.5 out of 10. So like a, B+.
Okay.
Good work, but must try harder.
Yeah.
I think we shouldn't
2-1.
We shouldn't talk it down. 2-1. Shouldn't talk it down. I think we should be excited about the future. I think there's a realism that, and I totally agree with that, we should be talking about video, or we should be talking about audio. We shouldn't be creating these things. There's some stuff to fix along the way, because this industry has grown up very, very quickly, and for too long has been very short term. So I think we have to make it more sustainable. So 7.5.
7.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Glass half full.
Glass half full. Steph?
Come on,
you
Steph.
You can answer last, Jay.
I don't want to copy, but I would have gone like a set. Yeah, I would have probably gone like a 7 or an 7. I'll go
Lower.
7.
Okay. Lower. Oh.
No, I would have gone 7 or 8. I was going to say. But then, I think we've come a long way. Everyone works very hard. Everyone demonstrates some great skills. But I think when you said turf war, it really resonated. Like, I think we are territorial. Even in my current role, like I work with some specialists who come from the more traditional background, and they might read an article about ad fraud and how much it's growing and be really like pour loads of disdain on digital. And I feel like I have to fight. I have to fight for myself and my industry. So I think there is more we can do. And I think we could probably be more collaborative and just generally come together a bit. Yeah.
On things.
Yeah.
Which is fair enough, I think. Yeah.
I was going to try and do a mean median modal, but then I got confused.
This is sort of Jerry Springer's final thought. Here, Jay. No pressure.
I think there is quite a range, though. I think there's some players in the industry which are great and really helpful, but then there's so much average and mediocre behaviour as well, I think, where they're not client-centric or customer-centric. So I'm going to go for 6.5, but I can see 8 on the horizon.
Okay. That's quite positive. Actually, with things. That's great.
Well, James, Steph, Jawad, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure to discuss this with you, and refreshing to know that there are people in the industry making moves and moving concepts like this forwards. There is a lot for marketers to think about when it comes to getting the media mix right. It's definitely safe to say that exploring the digital capabilities of brand channels is a worthwhile exercise. And getting familiar with the similarities and differences of these channels could arm you with the full spectrum of possibility for brand growth. In the next episode, I'll be continuing this discussion around the changing nature of advertising with Chief Economist at IAB Europe, Daniel Knapp. What does the future look like for marketing budgets? We hope you enjoyed listening, and wherever you get your podcasts, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. For further resources, downloadable slides, and more information on all the topics covered in our podcasts, visit changemakers.jcdecaux.co.uk. You'll also find my short e-learning series there on how to speak the language of the CFO on the JCDecaux Digital Academy. Thanks for joining, and see you next time.